Welcome back. Now, the 28th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, otherwise known as COP28, kicks off in the United Arab Emirates today. As this meeting kicks off, the SA Climate Finance Landscape report shows that South Africa needs at least 535 billion rand a year over the next 7 years to meet the 2030 Paris Agreement targets, which we've committed to. Business Unity South Africa's Energy and Environment Manager, Happy Khambule, joins us with greater insights into the country's investment needs for a just energy transition. Happy, thank you for your time and a good afternoon to you.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon to you too.
All right, we're at the end of 2023, so we've got about 6 years up to 2030, Happy. Maybe before we get into the finance needs, maybe it's important to understand whether our current climate policy and the targets are all coherent. Are we all speaking the same language and moving in the same direction?
Yeah, that's a very good question, considering the current political economy that we're in. But largely, yes, the direction of travel is more or less the same. I mean, we do have some issues around alignment when it comes to what we're going to do, primarily with the energy component of our mitigation target, which is electricity, right? The main idea in terms of our nationally determined contributions when it comes to energy was that we're going to reduce our emissions in the electricity sector quite largely due to the closure of some of the old power stations. And obviously, with where we are sitting, it becomes a little bit hard to justify that decision, even though economically and environmentally it makes sense to do so. In terms of energy security, it is a big concern. Now the question becomes whether or not that decision alone represents a backsliding in terms of our climate commitments to COP. And to our understanding, it depends really on the balance of forces here, because as long as we're increasing our renewable energy targets and our economy-wide emissions, which is essentially our commitment to the COP, are falling, then it makes sense that yes, we can continue. We can run the ones that are a little bit more efficient, a bit harder, but the ones that aren't running efficiently keep on breaking down, cost us a lot of money, and are the worst culprits in terms of emissions being emitted. Then we have to find a way to either cold store them or to decommission them. So that kind of balancing act is what kind of represents a misalignment. But broadly, in terms of the direction of travel, we're not moving backwards towards our mitigation commitments.
Also keen to get your thoughts on decarbonizing the private sector. Of course, we know with Eskom that's largely in the fore there, but with some private sector entities, that's all comes to mind, and there are a few others. Who's watching, these targets? I'm keen to find out the oversight body, Happy, ensuring that the private sector is also moving along, at the correct pace.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, outside of the market and the private sector itself, keeping itself in check, you've got the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment who provide that level of oversight, because these companies that are, let's say, carbon emitting companies, those who are liable for carbon tax, have two bodies that they need to account to. You've got your National Treasury through the carbon tax, where you have to record what your emissions are, and then that determines your liability based on the allowances that you may be able to access. And then on the other side is that as you're reporting on your greenhouse gases, and as well as the kinds of profiles that are starting to emerge in your company, that determines what will come out as sectoral targets as well as carbon budgets for those particular companies. And then moving on, that then escalates up to giving us a sense of what's happening really in terms of South Africa's total greenhouse gas inventory.
All right, let's talk about money now, Happy. A few years ago, we would have gone to one of the COPs. I think we've got $8.5 billion, if I'm not mistaken. I'm keen to find out, did we receive that money? What did we do with it?
Did we receive that money? And no, we are getting trinkets of it. And I think that's because of the modalities that have been employed. One of the areas of concern is really that the spread of how the money is being resourced between grants, concessional loans, and obviously debt, outright debt, is too wide. So there's an over-reliance on debt, which basically puts us in a bad position as a country. And the areas that are supposed to facilitate the justice element is too small. I mean, I think it's about 0.5% of the total mix. But look, the point is that the IPGs put together some money. It's now moved from 8.5 billion, I think, to 9.3, 9.4 billion, with new countries coming in to say, look, we want to incentivize you in this transition process. Is that the balance of that of that package is not really a favorable one. The good part about it is that we are starting to see a little bit of movement in terms of what is being offered, because it is highly unlikely that we'll be able to access the full spread of the package if it stays the way it is right now.
Very interesting dynamics, because then also we're also hearing a number of 500 billion rand every year until 2030. That's also quite steep. Happy, I must ask you, where could this money come from? We know that fiscally South Africa just has no room.
Yeah, I think it's a mix and a mesh of different types of funding. It's what most people call blended finance, especially when you are looking at recording whereabout you are able to access these funds. But this money is largely going to come from domestic sources, right, and leveraged with obviously the international packages that are coming, and not all. And maybe what we need to make sense of is that what the IPGs in terms of the JET-P have offered South Africa is just a portion of what is recorded as the 359 that we need every year up to 2030. So it's just a portion of that, and even the IPG one is basically for a couple of years and not necessarily the full spread of what is required annually. Most of this is going to have to be resourced locally and leveraged internationally, and unfortunately, because the state doesn't have the resources that it would ordinarily have to incentivize and to actually put this as part of the resources, we're going to have to really rely on public-private partnerships as well as largely the private sector.
Domestic sources actually is not a bad idea at all, Happy. We have deep financial markets here in South Africa, sophisticated financial systems. Is this actually going to work as an asset in raising money for the just energy transition?
I think so. From all indications, when speaking to the different financial institutions, they are quite involved in the modalities and the procedures that are being developed under the JET-IP, including the investment plan itself. But the main thing here is, do we have certainty? And I think that's what people are calling for, and from all sides of the table, whether it's civil society, whether it's the private sectors, that do we have certainty that this is the direction of travel that the country is going? We just need a little bit more signals from the country to say, no matter what happens, whether we wake up with a blue sky or a red sky, we're going this way. And we're going to make sure that we marshal not only the institutional arrangement around the investment plan and what is required, including the PCC, to ensure that we deliver on this piece of instrumental work.
All right, Happy. To a very large degree, very encouraging. Thank you so much for this conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. That was Busa's Environment and Energy Manager, Happy Khambule.